Hello, and welcome to another episode of Into the MoTaverse. Today I have Dan Moore with me. And yeah, I guess interesting person for me to have on board because I guess as you grow up on the internet and you have certain career paths, you meet people along the way. And for me, part of having a podcast is it's a great excuse to meet people, and I want to meet people at least virtually at first, to then maybe one day we'll meet in person. But Dan was one of these people that we were just chatting before we hit record and kind of laughing at some of the things that we've, loosely touched upon. But we've both been in community. He's been in DevRel. He's a technical developer type background. I've reviewed blog posts of his. We've followed each other on various social platforms, but I've never taken the time to meet virtually, at least. So now's the time, and I sent him an invite a few weeks back as a good old excuse to get together and explore what his world looks like at the moment. Because for me, to be honest, I think that's one of my biggest drivers with this podcast is to understand the tech world, I guess, that we live in at the moment. And I'm just trying to speak to as many people to help me make sense of it and help others make sense of it. So that's my intro of Dan. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Rosie, thank you so much for having me. It's going to be fun. And as you alluded to, we've definitely communicated in the past, but I think this is our first, face-to-face video call. So really appreciate you inviting me.
Awesome. And thank you for accepting my invite as well. Yeah, I thought it would be a good place to start would be, one is partly telling us a bit about yourself and your background, but also like the world is changing a lot. And I was looking at your like career history and where you've been, where you are now, coming from like a developer background, then DevRel and more kind of product strategy now. I'd be interested in hearing more about that, even if it's just myself. I find it very interesting to know, especially more recently, how things have changed, particularly with DevRel. I think there's some interesting changes that have happened there, but to be honest, I haven't paid too much attention recently, so it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, yeah. So I can give kind of a brief overview of my career. And I remember I got into software when I was working for my parents. They had a small insurance brokerage, and they had this letter they had to send out every month to people whose policies were expiring, and they were doing it manually. And this is, back in the day when you had WordPerfect was kind of the premier word processor. If that gives you any idea of the time frame, was before Microsoft Word was really the word processor of choice. And I figured out how to do it with mail merge, which to me saved so much time and so much misery and toil. And that to me was like the moment that software clicked and was like, wow, this can really help people. And I like to think that as kind of my origin story. And I meandered a bit, but yeah, so I've been a software developer, as you alluded to. I've been a CTO at a startup. I taught AWS certification courses for a little while. And then I moved into DevRel in 2019. And, talk about a crazy time to be in DevRel, right? I think it was probably, not that DevRel's old, but like,
Yeah.
as tumultuous a time as probably when it was getting started, right, in the 2010s, which I guess you could make the case for. But yeah, and then I have stayed within DevRel for a couple of years, and then, but DevRel at an early startup, which is basically what I was at, is a little bit different than DevRel at more established companies. So I was doing technical writing, community fostering, helping with marketing, helping with QA, being user zero is a phrase I've heard, and I love that, where you're like the first person to kind of like really try to use a dev focused product as a normal developer would. And then a couple of years ago, I decided that it was a good it was time for me to kind of move away from DevRel, and it was less DevRel itself, and it was more we were growing and we needed someone to manage a team of DevRels. And I have been down the management track enough times to know that it's not my happy place. And so we hired someone else to manage the DevRel team, and I shifted. And now I've ended up, my official title is a little fancy. It's Senior Director of CIAM Strategy and Identity Standards. And CIAM is Customer Identity and Access Management, which is what FusionAuth, my employer, does. And so the idea is I'm out there looking at the world, talking to customers, looking at competitors, sometimes talking to them too, and then looking at standards, which I think authentication is a little weird as a product category. I guess maybe not that weird. A lot of foundational infrastructure, I think, has like standards that are around it, right? Like databases have the SQL standard, and I think that anything that's container deployed has some standards that are, even if they're de facto, like around Kubernetes. But authentication has like a really solid couple of cross company standards bodies that I can talk to if we want, that really kind of help set a kind of a foundation. And this foundation is what customers expect, and it offers a certain level of interoperability. And then people build on top of that foundation and build kind of their own special sauce, whether that's performance or deployment or extensions. And there's a lot of different standards. So, you can kind of pick and choose which standards you want to focus on, which make most sense for the customers that you're targeting.
Yeah, it's definitely an area of expertise that I lack not a lot of knowledge on, but I feel it's equally as important to know about, especially like from a quality standpoint. But yeah, it's definitely something that kind of melts my brain a bit when we have to, it's like an area of expertise that I think people would have to dive deep into to be able to test properly or ensure the quality is in place. I'm curious, do you think that your experience as DevRel helped you towards your current role? Because yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting, right? It's quite a generalist role. You do a bit of this, you do a bit of that. Has it been with FusionAuth? Has it been just a DevRel team, or is there a DevRel and community team? I'm curious, like, what's the structure?
So, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's been the structure over the years? How that's been set up?
Yeah, so I think it's primarily been a DevRel team, although community was part of it. So I don't think we ever had, we definitely toyed with the idea of hiring someone just for community, but we never, or at least have not yet gotten to that point. So even today, the DevRel team is, monitoring the forum. The marketing team is monitoring socials. And I would dearly love for us to have someone, and this is, we were talking a little bit about stuff that's beyond your experience. Like, this is definitely something where you're the expert and I'm not, right? Around community. In my mind, community is everybody that is not paying you money, but that knows something about your product. And so obviously that like crosscuts a lot of things, like that crosscuts marketing. I think that crosscuts DevRel to some extent. And so we don't have a single owner. We do now, how do I put this? I want to put this carefully. We have a free version of our software that has been core to our product strategy for 8 years now. And we have, in the last 6 months or so, had a renewed focus on how can we help those people out? How can we understand more about those community users? And I think that's going to pay dividends down the line, but it's much more from a almost PLG motion, right? Like helping them help themselves with software, with better UX, with maybe some targeted communications, as opposed to a real community feel, which is, I would feel would be more like helping having someone basically, I mean, I don't want to put this, I don't want to offend you, but like, I think to some extent you can do community by providing like free, some level of support, right?
Yeah.
Like being out there in the community and like answering questions and things like that. And we still do some of that, but I think that's been a lesser focus than that more PLG motion.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially like, well, like you don't mean to offend me, but like, uh, just thinking about communities, like I've definitely evolved my thinking over the years. And I think we have to evolve our thinking around everything, right? And these days, when I think about community, I'm just like, well, it's just people, or it's people who care. That's how I like to define it. And that's so, in a sense, it's broad, but in a sense, it's quite defined. It's like you need to find people that care, and that could be the employees themselves, the customers, or anyone who's interested in your space, or your industry, or the people who might strive to build better products for your industry or standards, and those all for me come into community. Whether those people end up getting involved is not the point in my head. At least it's more we have to consider the whole ecosystem. So
Sure.
it's a fine line between community and ecosystem.
Mm,
But yeah, it's easier said than done as well. It's like, yeah, we can talk about this stuff, but what's the reality of things? And I guess what I find interesting is that a lot of more roles are becoming more. I wouldn't say generalist roles, but we're required to spread ourselves across various departments or across the organization or even across the ecosystem. So, like when you were describing DevRel, I was kind of thinking, yeah, it's very much like community, but it's also very much like quality. Like
mm,
testers and quality people are spread to do the job well. You can't just be focused just on testing. You actually have to spread yourself and learn about your industry, the organization, how things work, and it's just it's in some senses it's like, oh wow, this is exciting. In other senses it's like, oh wow, this is overwhelming.
well, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that about testing because I think that's true of DevRel, but I also, to be totally blunt, think it's true of good engineers now, right?
Yeah,
Like there is a world of difference, and there has been for decades, as far as I'm concerned, between a programmer who takes a spec and expects it to kind of be everything they need to make all decisions. They don't have to talk to anybody, and they can implement something in code, and a developer who is like more responsible for kind of the whole like delivery process and critically making sure that they're building the right thing, right? Like you don't want to just build the thing correctly, you want to build the right thing. And um, to me, that's it actually points to kind of a different problem. Like there's two problems, right? One is it spreads us all thin, right? When we start to think about knowing, if a tester needs to know the business domain in depth to test well, and they need to know like performance metrics, and they need to know like JVM options, that is a much bigger task. And then the other problem is, suppose you accept that, right? That everyone's kind of smearing themselves everywhere. Then how do you have like these bounds of responsibility where I can actually say, no, I'm not going to learn X. Rosie's got it, or someone else on my team has it, and I don't know. I think it's a function of us trying to do more with less, and a function of us having higher leverage capabilities, right? Like I can learn more about domain X in not today than I could 20 years ago. I used to buy books from O'Reilly, and it was a
yeah,
big investment and it took a lot of time. And now I can plug something into Claude or ChatGPT and say, give me a summary. Now, I 100% agree those are not the same levels of learning, right? Like, but I can have a wider swath of like understanding of things, and I can choose to dive deeper. Like I've definitely done this with AI. I've been like, tell me about these docs and ask me, explain to me like I'm five. And then I like ask more questions and I like poke and prod. And that's just a level of the ability to attain knowledge quickly, in a way is changed in a way that I don't think that I expected it to change.
yeah. And it's definitely like a straight to the point kind of like you know what you want and you get there so much quicker. Even just searching, right? It's like 2 3 years ago we would search on Google and we might think, oh, that's amazing, we can find the answers, but it would actually take a long time. Compared to now, it's like if you wouldn't be able to imagine going back to that when when we have what we have now, right?
Totally.
Even just like user even like researching people from maybe like a community or podcast perspective or speaker perspective, it's like I just quite often it's like you just search, use Claude or I prefer not to use Chat GPT these days, but Gemini. But it's almost instantly. It's like you get enough to then start to explore more. And yeah, I guess we all have a bit of common sense. I hope that we know when to dive deeper, or we know what to question, and we know how to check our sources as well.
Well, that's almost the skill now, right? I in college, I had a job where I was helping edit people's essays, and I think that in this world, there's obviously still room for creative writing that you write on your own. I actually was having a discussion, or not a discussion, more of a, I was talking or posting on Blue Sky about this, and I think there's kind of two kinds of work, right? The first is where the process is the point, and the second is where the output is the point. And I think we all need to like understand what those differences are, right? If I'm not writing a poem for my wife, which now I guess I've committed to do now that I've mentioned on a podcast, I certainly wouldn't want to just plug it into an AI system and write something, right? Like that would be lame. If I am trying to create a blog post, I think there's ample case for using AI somewhere in there, right? And there's a spectrum of how much you can use it. And I've done a blog post where I didn't touch the AI's output. I just took it and I just put it right in my blog. And I've done that exactly once because it was a fun experiment. That was in 2022 or 2023 or something like that. And it was okay, but it tasted,
Yeah.
it smelt like AI, right? And I use AI in my writing process now, but it's much more of like a thought partner, or, hey, I want to we don't need to dive too deep into how I use AI because every podcast is about AI all the time right now. But I guess the point I want to make is learning the same way you need to learn when to dive deep. I think you need to learn when to, how to curate. And we were, frankly, to your point, we were curating with Google before too, right? You were choosing which URL, which article to trust, and like what pieces to trust of that article. And now we're doing it, but we just have to do it that much quicker because the answers come back quicker.
Yeah, it's definitely a mind shift, I think. And for me, it's just like everything's changing, and I do think we like entire organizations have to change, and we're figuring out how to change. And from a few podcasts I've had recently, it's like the vibe that I have, at least at the moment, is like code is changing. We're shipping a lot faster, but others haven't had a chance to catch up and figure out what it means for them. But I'm curious because I really also would love to tap into like what's actually happening rather than what people are saying publicly on the internet that might not be true. So like, just an example I wrote about recently is that there was a Reddit post that was kind of going viral-ish. It was being screenshotted and shared across like LinkedIn and other places. And it was quality related, and it was related to like the quality team being reduced like by 75%, and now there's all these bugs appearing, and they shouldn't have gotten rid of quality because now they have all these problems. And then like I was like, really? I was like, yeah, this kind of sounds true, but it sounds too perfect of a story. And I looked at it, and then you look at the user count, and it's like 2 months old. And I was like, is this just like AI? Is this someone behind, making up a story that sounds, like it could be true, but there's no way of verifying it, right? Because there's no trust associated with it. And that's the problem. It's just like one small example. There's millions of them at the moment, right? And that's there's so many worse ones out there that I don't even want to go into. But it just changes everything now, right? Now I'm like, it's like, yes, like sometimes I do feel icky using AI for writing now, and any images. I just don't do it anymore. I mostly
Mm.
just work from my own mind at the moment. Occasionally dipping in to verify a few things, but um, for me, it's kind of like I don't want to go to Reddit anymore. And it's not that Reddit was perfect before; it wasn't. But it's like, I definitely don't go to X or anywhere like that. But it's just like tainted absolutely everything for me. Where it's led me to questions like, why are we even here? Or how
Mm.
should we move forward? How should we show that we care as companies, and what do we actually build, and how do we kind of uh, like protect ourselves or just keep our head down to focus on what actually matters. Yeah, but that's a bit of a sidetrack there. But I guess I'm curious is like what's actually happening in FusionAuth,
Sure.
and how are how is it changing? How is AI changing? What's changed? I guess let's say in the past 2 or 3 years, uh, structurally, or how you build code. But really focusing on like what the team is actually doing, and especially I guess the tech behind it. I guess is interesting from a quality perspective as well.
Sure. So just so I understand what you're asking, because that was definitely an interesting
Yeah.
philosophical, like little bit of a not a meander, but a little bit of a tangent. So I just want to make sure I get to where you want to go, which is you're basically asking kind of like how have we kind of at FusionAuth, dealt with AI and how we're thinking about it. Is that basically the question?
Yeah. Without all the hype, I guess is like without all the
Sure.
distraction and the hype is like what's actually happening like as an organization, and I guess as a product as well. How is
Sure.
AI changing or making you think about things?
Yeah, totally. So I think it does depend on the department you're in. So I think that it has enabled a lot of kind of one-off internal apps that just wouldn't have gotten, or even just analyses that wouldn't have gotten done before, because they were maybe a good idea, but didn't make the cut. And so I think that is actually a really interesting aspect of AI. If you're building something that is, don't want to say throwaway, but something that doesn't require the quality of something that you're going to sell, that's just scratching an internal itch, I think that AI is radically lowered, and the activation energy required for that, and radically made it more open to other parts of the organization, right? Marketing team, sales engineers, things like that can now build custom applications that solve their needs in a way that I think they might have been hesitant to before, because it took too much time away from their day job, or they didn't have the skills to do it. And you saw that a bit before with like Replit and some of the internal, like the no code tools, but this is kind of that on steroids. So there's that aspect of things, which is interesting to me. Then I think you want to think about AI from an engineering standpoint in kind of two pieces. The first is how you use it to build the product, and then how the product enables other people to build with AI safely. So we've been on a journey to using more AI. I think that 3 or 4 years ago, there were definitely some concerns around the legality of it, just to be blunt, right? Like, is this something, because we are not open source. We have a proprietary code base. We give it away for free in a lot of use cases, or a lot of cases, but we definitely charge for it too. And so there was concern about, hey, are we going to let this AI read our source code and like do stuff with it, or are there concerns about like our IP being stolen? And I think that some of the hyperscalers did a good job of saying, "Hey, actually, we gotcha." Microsoft has kind of, I believe, a blanket indemnification clause where they say we won't train on your stuff and it's ours. So that took care of that concern. And now we, like, I think many organizations have engineers that are adopting AI at differing levels, right? There are people who are on the vanguard, people who are doing this stuff on the weekends, people who are internal advocates, and then there are other folks who are more comfortable with the older way of doing things. And I think we have done some internal trainings, mostly ad hoc, and people have shown, some of the people in the forefront have shown some of the benefits, right, in terms of just driving more code more quickly. And I think that is a thing to convince people. And if I've had to think one thing around, especially around coding, if I had to say one thing to folks, is it is a tool. I don't think it's a replacement, because there's a whole bunch of software that I don't think AI can help with. It can be great at writing code, but operating and maintaining code, I think it struggles more with. And so to me, personally, I think it's like IntelliSense on, squared, right? But it's still a tool. So that's building software. And then there's how is FusionAuth positioning itself to be a tool that other folks can use for AI. And we break that out into kind of three pieces. First is, and it's basically, they're all broken out on the use case you're trying to solve with the problem you're trying to solve. So the first is retrieval augmented generation, which is just basically a way to feed more data into AI systems. We have a permissions, an authorization server that lets you offer fine-grained permissions, so that if we have it's called RAG. If we have a RAG system that is, bunching up, is basically processing a bunch of documents, well, you might have access to different documents than I do, and so you need a permission system around that. So that's the first one. The second is MCP, which is just a way to connect AI agents to or AI systems to data sources, and there we are working towards having OAuth 2.1 and the other standards that are needed to protect MCP servers. We do support, protecting APIs, which frankly CLIs and SDKs in some cases are better than MCP. And then the last one is agentic systems, where we're really focused on the identity of the agent and token management. So we are very aware, as I think anybody in software is aware, that AI is big. And I break out the engineering piece into how you use it to build your product, and then what your product can be used to help other people build with AI.
Yeah, it's interesting. What would you say, for kind of authentication and permissions? What are the biggest risks that are kind of surfacing up as a result of AI? Is there anything that we should be aware of, thinking about as we're building software, and almost protecting ourselves as well against all the agentic stuff or AI stuff that's going on?
So I think this actually, I think that coding agents are the ones that are furthest advanced, right? And that's because they have this very nicely defined boundary. It's like it's the file system, it's the Git pull request, it's tests, and it's those are kind of the three things, and it's branches, right? So if an agent blows stuff up, then I don't care, because I just delete the branch and start again. And so what we need are the analogs of those things for the real world. And so we need those boundaries. And the one thing that worries me all the time is, if you had made me pick a software organization that understands permissions and understands fine-grained access control, it'd be Google, right? Google operates at a scale that I can't imagine. They have, Google Zanzibar was the paper that spawned a bunch of different authorization as a service vendors, and they still don't, as far as I know, have a way for me to specify, hey, I want this agent to have access to my Google Drive for the next hour, and only to be able to read and update files. I don't want to be able to delete files. I don't want to be able to create new files. And so Google itself has this issue, and all the services that all the agents were going to want to have are going to need that kind of fine-grained permissions, and people need to build those into those services. That's not something you can just layer on, right? That's not something that any of the RAG or MCP or agentic identity stuff that I talked about speaks to. You need to build that into your services, and that's my worry. Is I don't think people are thinking about that. They're thinking about identifying the agent, which is a great first start, right? But you need to have those permissions behind it and have them be time bound or have them be, really limited, because I am happy to have my agent, interact with Google Drive in that way, or possibly, check my email periodically. But like the idea of like giving it carte blanche access to my email or my Google Drive is terrifying to me. And I think that it's only a matter of time. We've already seen people like lose production databases to agents. If you give your agent access to your Gmail, it would not surprise me if you're going to have unexpected, horrible consequences, and we'll probably be reading about those in the next year, I'd say.
Yeah, it sounds really scary. I was just talking to someone today. I was saying I'd love someone to actually manage my calendars because I'm really bad at calendars. And I said, like, I need a personal assistant because like, I'm always getting it wrong. There's always something that I get wrong on calendar settings. And I was thinking it'd be nice to have a agent who does that for me instead of thinking I need a PA. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe one day there'll be something that can do that for me. But yeah, not today, as as the saying goes.
Yeah, not this day.
Not today. Do you have any tips on how to think about testing or approaching like quality layers when it comes to permissions and authentication, or any useful resources that you would point people towards?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you'd want to. That to me is a perfect case for automation, right? Like, because you basically want to like exhaust the universe of possibilities. And the nice thing about authorization is that no matter how complex it gets, it's a deterministic system. That's kind of the point of it. So I think that if I was talking to a tester, I would just, well, and the nice thing about this is actually, like, in theory, because it's so deterministic, the business requirements should translate directly to tests, right? Like, person A can do this, person B can do this if you're in group A. So I don't have any kind of offhand or like resources. Actually, that's not true. I think it would be useful for testers to learn about the different models of authorization. One is role-based access control. This is something like you might encounter in a WordPress or something like that, where you have, editor, writer, author, reader. That's kind of older school. Then you have ABAC, which is attribute-based access control, which is where you bring RBAC, but you also can layer things like time of day or the IP address you came from or other attributes. And the third would be reback, which is Google Drive is the canonical example I always point to, which is I don't just grant Rosie access to Rosie doesn't have like, you might have like an editor role or a viewer role, but you also have access to a certain tree in my Google Drive, and you can have access to kind of everything underneath that. And that's called relationship-based access control. So I think it's important for testers to understand kind of which authorization model they're dealing with, and then really think about automating the access tests, because it should be deterministic. It shouldn't be something that is flexible. That's not what we want with authorization.
What does a quality team look like for you? Do you have one?
We don't actually. So we have a big suite of tests, and we do a lot of, the engineers kind of own that piece. Like I mentioned, when I was in DevRel, I was user zero. So we've had that. We're about 75 people. And I have not heard any desire to hire like a quality team. I think between you and me and the rest of the internet, we might benefit from
Right.
someone kind of banging on stuff, but we recently hired a UX person who, and I think product to some extent plays some of that role. DevRel to some extent, or Dev Success plays that role to some extent, but we don't have a
Yeah.
dedicated. And again, we have, oh gosh, I don't know, tens of thousands of tests, automated
Yeah.
tests that kind of beat on every portion of the system. I think I don't think it takes hours to run them all if you run them all across the matrix of all the supported platforms and things like that. So it's not like
Yeah.
we're not testing, but we don't have a dedicated quality team.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. And I think, I mean, I don't know if it's always been like that, but testing and quality is definitely changing or has been changing over the years. It used to be quite siloed. When I came back to MOT 2.5 years ago now, I think it was like I just felt like our community couldn't just be about testing anymore, despite the name being a Ministry of Testing. Slight problem there, but like we started shifting towards quality, and like now a lot of the talk about quality is just like quality is everywhere, and quality coaches and continuous quality, and um, definitely a big shift in conversation about like test automation. It's like, well, increasingly like the devs are just doing it because that makes sense. It shouldn't be the testers doing it. So definitely a big shift. And then for me, it's just like, oh, we've gone from testing to quality, but actually because quality is everywhere, I'm kind of feeling like I can't just talk about quality. I have to talk about tech in general. I have to talk about product. I have to talk
Sure.
about all these things because they're all related to quality at the end of the day. But like, I guess like I don't like to feel restricted, which has gotten me thinking about where are we going, and like the whole generalist angle where so many of us are doing more. Um, we need to talk more. We need to build bridges. Perhaps is like a common saying in community world kind of thing.
Hmm.
Is we should build bridges, and maybe we're all a bit too siloed as well. Is kind of um, what's been, I guess, top of mind for me is like developers should be talking more to other people. We, as testers, we should be talking more. Community, we should all be talking more. Um, but then perhaps to add to that, it's like we're almost more fragmented now more than ever because of changes in the world, and we're almost talking less because we've lost places like Twitter that were great for connecting with other people, and not just people in your own little bubble. At least that's what I felt. It's like I could easily cross over to and connect with so many more people than just who I connect with now, and that's been top of mind, I guess, as well. And yeah, I don't know. Do you feel that? Do you feel? And I guess like if you feel that, it's like how do you see that happening, or what any thoughts on like what we could do in the world to like um, bring us together more?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things I would say that even within companies, I think there's less talking than there should be, and I think part of that's remote culture. Although I love working remotely, it definitely makes it harder to kind of have some kinds of conversations. And then, frankly, AI itself, like the fact that I can get an answer against our code base by asking GitHub Copilot as opposed to asking a dev. So that means that, yes, I get my answer quicker, but it also means I don't build that relationship with the developer to answer that question, right? And I don't
Yeah,
ask it in a public place so that other people can kind of
yeah,
ambiently pick that up. So I mean, my answer to that is you have to be conscious, right?
yeah,
Because and realize that, and this has been true forever. This is not an AI thing. It's not a cloud thing. It's not a software thing. It's like there is, it's that old saying: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think you need to kind of think about that trade-off. Um, every time someone asks a question in a public place, they are slowing things down, but they're also raising the general knowledge of because let me be more clear. They're slowing things down because people have to take time off to answer the question. Someone might look at it and not know the answer. It might cause a discussion. So that slows things down, but it also elevates the entire knowledge of the organization. And I'm talking about smaller orgs here. I'm not saying that 100,000 person software company should have everybody be able to ask questions and have everybody in the same channel. But so be conscious about creating those opportunities for learning. And so that could look like brown bag lunches. That could look like all hands meetings. That could look like, in the wider community, I'm a huge fan of meetups. I helped organize the Boulder Ruby meetup for 4 or 5 years. I've taken a step back from that for reasons, but going out and being in a physical place with people does lead to those kind of conversations. And I think we are hungry for that and we need that. And so if you made me pick one thing, it would be, organizing in-person meetups to help with that cross collaboration, which has its own costs, right? Like I'm not up for an online meetup anymore. It's not 2020 or 2021. And so that means that it's going to take time to get to the place. It's going to take up an evening of my time. But that is the best way, I think, to like rebuild that connective tissue.
Yeah, we've literally rebuilt Meetup inside our platform, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I'm quite excited about that because Meetup, they take all your data and they don't let you see it, and everything drives me crazy about it. But yeah, perhaps to wrap up, as you were saying that, I was thinking that sometimes, obviously, AI gets a lot of stick, right? But maybe there's something about how AI is making us less fragmented in some senses, in the way that we are digging into the data that people share. Obviously, there's ethical concerns that are associated with that. But if we could improve that, maybe that is something that could help build bridges better. If we can, like, as people commit to writing publicly, or in the Fediverse world, is not writing on these bigger platforms that just take your own data, but writing on your own blog, for example, or your company blog. Maybe that makes sense as a way to build bridges, is the way the world is going. At least partially. I wouldn't put all my eggs into that basket, but it's like it is a way that we're connecting, right? Even if we don't realize it, we're connecting to ideas, and AI is helping, and it does often link back to the sources. But perhaps there's something in that, like to. I often get dragged down in the negativity of AI, and I'm trying to think positively and look for the positive parts. And as we're building up like the MoTaverse, I'm trying to think about like we're gonna have to use more AI and think about how to build out a community platform, and how we can perhaps ethically use the community knowledge to give people access in the right kind of way. And what does that look like? Honestly, I don't know, but it's definitely something I'm thinking about. But yeah, it almost seems stupid not to be thinking like that. And but where is that balance? I don't know, because I'm definitely like being protective of a lot of our data, but not giving it all away.
Sure.
But like some of it. It's like you can have some of it. Like Google can have some of it, but not all of it. But it's like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, right?
I mean, I will say that I think the people who think we're right on the step of the singularity and like AI is going to change everything and bring us to like a post scarcity world are, in my mind, just as stupid or just as foolish or just as short-sighted as the people who are like, I'm never going to touch AI, right? Like if someone comes up with a jackhammer, why would you use a sledgehammer? Well, the answer is you would not never use a sledgehammer. You would use the jackhammer when it made sense and the same sledgehammer when it made sense. And AI is definitely, there's some ethical issues. There's climate change issues, for sure. There's also the fact that it can be magical. Like this is an example that like my daughter was doing some homework and we needed some help. And she took a picture of the homework problem and said, explain it to me, to an AI system. And it was able to explain it to her. Now, this gets back to the process versus the result, right? Like she could have just written down the answer from the AI thing, and then she would have learned nothing. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. We're gonna like try to understand the thing, and we're gonna like ask other questions, or I will explain it after reading it because I've had my math knowledge refreshed. And to me, that is the right way to use this, fantastic new tool. It's to increase your understanding, not to, in this case, she was learning something, so it was to increase her understanding as opposed to just getting the right answer. Same reason that, there was a kerfuffle. I know we're come up on an end, but like there was a kerfuffle around calculators 30 or 40 years ago, right? And I don't think anyone would think about like doing a professional job without a calculator. To me, AI it needs guardrails, but it is a calculator, a fancy calculator.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And it's I don't send my kids to school. So, there's, like, why send them to school now when you've just got AI where they can just ask anything?
Right.
It's certainly, I don't know. It's like what they teach in school feels a bit off with where the world is going.
That's probably a whole other podcast right there.
Yeah. But yeah, it's good to chat. Any final thoughts or comments before we wrap up?
I would just say, you're building this community around quality. Quality is tied to giving the user what they need when they need it. And I think that the same way that the developer persona is getting smeared, like the testing and the quality persona is getting smeared too. And I think that people who have been thinking about quality and caring for users and getting stuff done correctly for a long time have a great opportunity in this new world, because caring to some extent is like the most important finite resource. So I hope that everyone in your community continues to care and continues to help deliver to people what they need.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Dan. And I'll see you in the MoTaverse.